My younger sister was like our birth mother, aloof and pure like a chrysanthemum. When Madam, the official wife, wanted to adopt us, she coldly refused. We, my sister and I, do not care for the hollow title of legitimate daughters. We cannot forget the kindness of our birth mother. Unless she is raised to the status of secondary wife, we will never agree. Madam was enraged and directly married both of us off to the son of a vice minister, as concubines. Concubines, mere playthings for men. In the inner chambers, my sister and I were suppressed by the matron day after day. Life was suffocating. I had no choice but to flatter my husband and fight desperately for his favor, just to gain a sliver of peace for the two of us. Everything I earned through reward or favor, I gave to my sister. She barely had enough to eat. She accepted what I handed over, but would sneer and scoff. Sister, scrambling for favor and fawning like that is pathetic. I despise those who use such cheap tricks. In the end, during the inter-court power struggle, both the matron and I lost miserably. And yet, my sister profited. She became the secondary wife. When I was gravely ill, I begged her to call a physician. She idly played with her nails and said with indifference, "A person as disgraceful as you, death might be your best relief." I died in that broken-down courtyard, starved and sick. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day Madam wanted to adopt us. This time, I shoved my sister aside and resolutely knelt to the ground. "Daughter is willing. Thank you, Mother, for your kindness." Madam was kind-hearted. To even consider adopting me was already a stroke of fortune. The old maid sent to receive us was delighted and nodded slightly. But my sister, Shunziyun, was different. She lifted her head with stubborn pride, her face cold and haughty. "I care nothing for empty titles. If I have to kneel before the madam, wouldn't that betray the grace and love of my birth mother? I will never forget her." Clad in elegant white robes, she radiated untouchable pride, like a pure white chrysanthemum. The old maid glanced at her with disdain. "Ungrateful. If that's how it is," she said, "from today forward, Zimo will be Madam's daughter. As for a lesser daughter like you, stay here and live or die on your own." Tears welled in Shun Ziyun's eyes, but she lifted her chin and said stubbornly, "I merely remember my mother's kindness." "What crime is that? Sister, have you forgotten her already? How can you call another woman mother?" She frowned, then turned sharply to face the old maid. "If my birth mother is not granted the title of secondary wife, I will never go to Madam." I laughed mockingly, standing beside the old maid as I looked at her. "Sister, you truly don't know your place. Madam is compassionate enough to adopt us under her wing, yet you still dare harbor such wild thoughts. In this life, do you still want me to help you seek death?" Shinziyun was my own flesh and blood sister. We shared the same mother, born in the Shun household. Our birth mother was a low-ranking concubine. She rarely left her little courtyard, always maintaining an air of detachment. She clearly wanted father to visit her room, but pretended to be lofty. Who knew where her dignity came from? She refused to step outside or compete for favor. She just sat there brewing crude tea, fiddling with weeds and bamboo, her eyes often drifting toward the gate, as if waiting for that man to appear. But he never did. Father had nearly forgotten she even existed. She didn't fight for favor and could only watch as father spent every night in other women's chambers. The three of us, mother, sister, and I, spent our days in that courtyard, staring at each other with blank faces. She'd say, "You don't need to curry favor. Your father still thinks of us in his heart. Right now, he just needs Madam's status for support." But he visited the other concubines regularly. She always said, "One day, your father will raise me to the status of secondary wife." Sigh. Even though she claimed not to care about status, she still dreamed of being legitimized for our sake. Back then, all she thought about was either becoming secondary wife or replacing the madam entirely. I couldn't help but wonder. Madam had her powerful maternal family backing her. Our mother, a commoner's daughter with no support. On what grounds could she become secondary wife? She didn't even have father's affection. Father never came. She kept secrets. Said she didn't care, but eventually passed away, sick with disappointment. Now, thinking back, my sister truly inherited this trait of hers. Just a few words, and she already wanted our mother raised to secondary wife. She didn't even consider, what did we have? We were nothing. Like grass beneath their feet. Even surviving was hard enough. As expected, The old maid snorted coldly. In that case, stay right here. This broken-down bamboo hut is the perfect place for someone like you. Her meaning was clear, but Shunzian still maintained her arrogant pose. I'd rather break than bend before the powerful. At least I won't lose face. Humph. As if someone like you could compare with the goddesses of poetry and virtue. I sneered and waved goodbye. Then stay here and behave yourself, little sister. Without looking back, I followed the old maid away. Behind me, I could feel Shun Ziyun's hateful gaze. But I didn't care. My hatred for her was no less than hers for me. In our past life, she turned down Madame's kindness, chose to stay in the bamboo courtyard, and wore her chrysanthemum-like pride like a crown. When Madame heard of it, she flew into a rage. From that day on, she never extended a helping hand to us again. She accepted that our courtyard was nothing but an empty shell that made a lot of noise. Even stray cats and dogs felt they could trample over us without consequence. Our lives were like walking on thin ice, never enough to eat, never warm enough to sleep. And yet, Shun Ziyun remained unrepentant, stubbornly believing she was in the right. She thought her lofty and pure demeanor was enchanting. When Madame learned how difficult our lives had become, she merely smiled coldly. If they enjoy that shabby bamboo hut so much, and want to be mere concubines, then let them have their way. Just in time, the son of the vice minister is preparing to take in concubines. I and Appos, LL go with the flow and gift him a pair of sisters, make full use of their value. That night, the two of us were placed into two small sedan chairs and quietly taken through the back gate of the vice minister's residence, becoming concubines. We could not refuse. We had no right to refuse. The legal wife in that house was infamous for her jealousy. Every single concubine who stepped through those doors was tormented until they were no longer human. At least in the Shun residence, I could barely fill my stomach. But once we entered the vice minister's household, I came to understand what true hell was. Shunzian still wore white, elegant as ever, reciting poetry without reservation, waiting for the young lord to notice her. But she caught the attention of the young madam instead. Our food was cut down to a single bowl of thin rice porridge, barely enough to fill one's belly, let alone satisfy hunger. The maids around the young madam would come to make trouble whenever they pleased. We were tormented, day after day, in endless darkness. I finally couldn't take it anymore. If it continued like this, we would die in that place. So I began to fight for favor. But Shun Ziyun told me, we are illegitimate daughters. We have no right to compete for favor. As concubines, we should strictly abide by our roles and not entertain foolish hopes. And yet, it was she who defied the young madam. She who wore white, pure as chrysanthemums, to attract the young lord. And it was both of us who suffered the punishment. There were countless long nights when I curled up in a corner, licking my wounds alone. I only wanted to eat my fill, to live a little better. I had no choice but to climb upward, using every means possible to capture the young lord's attention. Eventually, I succeeded. He began to favor me. I could finally eat my fill, and I even shared half of my rewards with my sister. With food in her belly, her complexion improved significantly, and her criticism of my lack of dignity became even sharper. To maintain that meager prosperity, I had no choice but to change my approach, become more seductive. But then my sister appeared, uninvited, dressed in white as always. She held her head high and looked at me with disdain, frowning. Sister, don't act so flirtatiously. Our husband won't like it. You're ruining our virtue as women. But the young lord was taken with her cold, andoof demeanor, believing it to be genuine. He adored her. From then on, Shun Ziyun received exclusive favor. The young madam, jealous but helpless, turned her wrath toward me. My life became even more miserable. Driven to despair, I begged my sister for help. But she said coldly, you didn't act within your bounds. This is retribution. I cannot interfere with your karma. You must bear it on your own. If it hadn't been for her, I would never have become the target. In despair, I fought back. In the struggle with the young madam, we both suffered. I lost the child in my womb. The madam lost her position as legal wife. And Shun Ziyun, once again, profited in peace. By refusing to scheme or fight, she won the young lord's heart and became the moonlight in his eyes, endlessly favored and eventually raised to the rank of secondary wife. Soon after, I fell seriously ill. I begged her to save me. but she shoved me away in disgust, blinded by greed. Sister, scrambling for favor never ends well. Someone as shameless as you, death is your only release. I followed the old maid to Madame's chambers, dressed in finery, fed and cared for. Not long after Madame adopted me, I received a letter from Shun Ziyun. Sister now lives in wealth and comfort. Surely you've long forgotten your younger sister, who still struggles in the pit of suffering. I am gravely ill. I hope you haven't forgotten our birth mother's final wish, that the two of us support one another. Sitting upright in embroidered robes at my desk, I burned the letter to ash. My hairpin gleamed silver in the moonlight. I truly couldn't understand. What grave illness could she possibly have? She simply couldn't stand seeing me live well. She wanted to pull me down. I picked up a brush and wrote a few lines. Dearest sister, stay strong. Recovery takes time. Now that I live under Madame's roof, I must strictly uphold propriety. I cannot overstep. You'll need to find your own way for now. I had the letter delivered. Later, the maid who had returned with the reply informed me that Shun Ziyun was furious. She shouted that I was heartless, cold, and cruel. She wanted to confront me and ask how I could forget our sisterly bond. But sadly, she no longer had the status to even step into the main hall. Still, that didn't stop her from scheming. That day, I was dining with Madame. Father was there too. Suddenly, a maid burst in with urgent news. Terrible news. Master, Miss Ziyun has collapsed. Father was momentarily stunned. He didn't respond. Madame glanced sideways at him and immediately saw through his hesitation. Perhaps he had already forgotten the existence of that daughter. She dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a handkerchief and said slowly, She's Zimo's younger sister, isn't she? Would you like to check on her? Only then did Father seem to remember. Yes, let's go. Quickly, summon the physician. We followed Father to the bamboo hut in the rear courtyard. The moment we stepped inside, a wave of cold, desolate air hit us. With just one glance, I already knew what Shun Ziyun was trying to do. On that worn-out bed, Shun Ziyun was wrapped in a patchwork quilt, dressed in rags barely holding together. The room had not a single piece of proper furniture. She looked emotional, struggling to sit up. Father, you've come. Your daughter greets you. Father's brows furrowed instantly. Madam, what is the meaning of this? Madam looked truly wronged. She had never mistreated the girl, nor ever instructed the servants to do so. Even in the previous life, it was only after Ziyun and I caused her public embarrassment that the servants began to scorn us, denying us food. No matter how harsh those days had been, Shun Ziyun had always dressed neatly. In this life, with me around, the servants didn't and oppose know the real dynamic between us. They didn't dare treat her poorly. For her to fall into this state, she must have gone to great lengths to stage it. Madame, a veteran of the inner court, would be a fool not to see through the performance. Father hurried forward, gently consoling the daughter he had barely acknowledged before. Good child, you've suffered. Father came too late. Shun Ziyun shook her head. Father, Ziyun is not suffering. The tender father-daughter reunion was, in truth, mostly a performance. After a few exchanged words, Father turned back toward Madame. Have you come up with any explanation? Madame took a step forward, keeping her composure. Explanation. I'm not sure what I've done wrong. I've sent clothes for her during every festival. I respected her wishes when she chose to stay here. Should I be blamed for her pretending to live in misery? Father's tone turned stern. Are you twisting words again? All these years, I entrusted the rear courtyard to you. This is how you've treated my daughter. Now you lie to cover it up. Everyone knows you wanted to adopt both sisters, but Ziyun refused. That's why you're punishing her now. I casually leaned on a wardrobe in the corner, hand hidden within my sleeve. With a gentle tug, a pile of unsorted chests came crashing down. I gasped in mock surprise. Oh no, what is all this? As expected, it was all there. This hut was small. That corner was the only place anything could be hidden. Madame cast me a pleased glance, then subtly signaled a maid. An older maid quickly stepped up and opened one of the trunks. Inside were luxurious garments, tea sets, and various valuable items. Shun Ziyun's expression darkened. She glared at me furiously. Before she could speak, Madame cut in smoothly. My lord, I've always prided myself on being fair. But if you insist on blaming me, then let me speak plainly. As you can see, this has all been a performance for your benefit. Was it a satisfying show? She smiled faintly. Half a month ago, Knowing they had no mother and might suffer hardship, I chose to adopt both sisters. I thought they would live better under my care. But do you know what she said? A maid recounted it vividly. She said, unless her birth mother was elevated to secondary wife, she would rather die than call Madam Mother. Madam's smile curled at the corner. I had no idea a concubine could inspire such arrogance. Father's face grew darker by the second. He looked at the pale Shen Ziyun, who could no longer hold the act, and roared. So it's true. This whole show, this illness, this pitiful living, is all fake. Furious, he flung his sleeve and turned to leave, refusing to hear another word. Father, no, it's not like that. They framed me. Enough. After all this, what else is there to say? With that, he stormed off. Madame glanced coldly at Shen Ziyun, now limp on the bed, unable to pretend any longer. With a light laugh, she too turned and left. I remained behind. I wanted to see it, that flicker of hope in her eyes, slowly extinguish. Through gritted teeth, she spat. Are you satisfied now? You and Madame, conspiring together to ruin me. Are you finally pleased? I stepped forward. My embroidered shoes, stitched with gold thread, stood across from her torn slippers. It was you who ruined yourself, little sister. Shen Ziyun screamed in desperation. You forgot mother this quickly. Shen Zimo, you are not worthy to be her daughter. No matter how she shouted, I walked away calmly, never looking back. She seemed to forget, our birth mother could have lived a much better life. Though her background was far below Madame's, she wasn't poor. She could have become the legal wife of another man and lived with dignity. But due to her foolish infatuation and secret longing for status, she insisted on becoming father's concubine, believing it to be a path of honor. That was why both of us sisters ended up in such misery. In truth, it was our deceased mother who had no dignity at all. Under Madame's care, I lived well in the rear courtyard. She taught me music, chess, painting, and poetry. My bearing became refined and elegant, her nurturing clear in every gesture I made. Meanwhile, the bamboo hut in the side yard remained just as dilapidated. Perhaps the sounds of laughter and cheer from the front courtyard grated on Shen Ziyun's nerves. At times, she would appear at the edge of the front hall, dressed in coarse linen, head held high, a cold sneer in her eyes as she came to speak with me. Sister, have you already forgotten our mother? How can you live so joyfully, sister? I slowly walked toward her in my embroidered shoes, a faint fragrance trailing behind me. If you haven't forgotten our birth mother, then don't step out of that bamboo hut again. This place doesn't seem to have room for you anymore. She glared at me angrily, but refused to leave. This is... A young man dressed in fine brocade approached, curiosity flickering in his eyes as he glanced at my sister. I smiled sweetly, though the amusement didn't reach my eyes. Looping my arm through his, I turned my head back and beamed like a flower in bloom. This is my younger sister, Shen Ziyun. Shen Ziyun kept a frosty expression, pulled her arm away from mine, and straightened her robes before bowing in perfect form. Determination burned clearly in her eyes. I curved my lips in a faint smile. As expected, her appearance here meant that the message I sent had reached her. This man was father's most prized student, the top scholar of the current dynasty, with a bright future ahead. Shen Ziyun had taken interest. But she was just an illegitimate daughter. How could she climb such heights? Right now, she was fit only to be a stepping stone beneath my feet. Mai, I think your mother is calling, came the gentle voice of Qian beside me. Seeing how close we were, Shen Ziyun kept her face composed, but I caught the unmistakable flash of jealousy in her eyes. As expected, she quietly followed behind us. There was nothing clever that Shen Ziyun could come up with in that shabby bamboo hut, only these petty tricks. After dinner, Madame urged me to take Qian on a walk to help with digestion. Her intentions couldn't be more obvious. Not long into the stroll, Shen Ziyun happened to bump into us. Sister, what a coincidence. May I join the two of you for a short walk? This courtyard wasn't large, coincidence hardly applied. I chuckled softly. Of course, if that's what you want. She lowered her head, cold as ever, but the faint scent of flowers clung to her deliberately, as she subtly edged closer to Qian. Amusing. She acted as if it had been us who invited her to join the walk. By the lakeside, peach blossoms were in full bloom. I gently touched a branch. You used to love these peach blossoms when we were young, didn't you, sister? Look, they're blooming again. Seeing an opportunity, Shun Ziyun stepped closer. Then, feigning a stumble, she fell backward. Sister, these flowers, ah? What are you doing? She cried out like a startled bird. But the moment she approached, I had already stepped aside, returning calmly to stand beside Qian. She had intended to make it seem as though I pushed her. But I had lived 2 lives. How could I not anticipate such a crude scene? I was already on guard. Shun Ziyun looked momentarily embarrassed, about to pretend it was a misunderstanding and straighten herself. But then she lost balance and slipped into the lake. Ah, help me. Watching her flail in the water, I saw Qian's gaze turn dark. He, too, had seen through it. A man who could become the top scholar of the empire was no fool. Your sister wanted to trap you, he said. I nodded silently. She often competes with you like this. I didn't answer. These days, she wasn't even in a position to compete. Everything she tried to take from me wasn't even what I truly wanted. Hearing the commotion, the maids and guards rushed over. The maids didn't know how to swim, so a guard dove into the lake to pull her out. Father and Madam soon arrived, breathless. What happened? Qian calmly recounted the incident, word for word, without bias. Everyone present was discerning enough to read between the lines. Father looked at the soaked Shun Ziyun, now wrapped in a blanket on the shore. His eyes were unreadable. Madam's brows, usually arched delicately, began to rise. Shun Ziyun trembled, casting me a resentful glance. I knew what she blamed me for. Why didn't Qian rescue her? But from beginning to end, I hadn't said a single unnecessary word. She couldn't blame others, so she turned her blame onto me. Human hearts were so difficult to understand. Her intent had been obvious. Create an opportunity for Qian to save her, then cry, make a scene, and force Father to settle things. And just like that, the engagement would fall to her. But what she didn't expect was that Qian never moved an inch. He stood there, still as stone. In the end, it was only a low-ranking guard who pulled her from the water. Fuming, Shun Ziyun clutched her blanket, chest heaving, tears mixing with the lake water. She slunk away, defeated and humiliated. To Father, a daughter who had lost her chastity had but one use left, to leverage for political ties. After the incident at the lake, no matter how sickly or fragile Shun Ziyun pretended to be, it was useless. She could no longer dream of a good marriage. Madam soon slammed her hand on the table and decided the matter. She picked a man for Shun Ziyun. When Father heard, he only said one thing. Let Madam decide. Shun Ziyun had no idea. She didn't know it was me who had placed the name of Jiang Lanfeng, son of the vice minister, on Madam's desk. It was me who had written down the mutual benefits this marriage would bring between the Jiang and Shin families, then tucked it into the proposal. Without me, that engagement might never have happened. Soon enough, the Jiang household came to ask for Shun Ziyun's hand. Jiang Lanfeng arrived with his wife and his mother, not to propose a match, but to take in a concubine. Standing beside Madam, I watched the graceful smile of Jiang's young Madam. A familiar feeling rose in me. Perhaps, in the last life, we had struggled too deeply. Even now, seeing her face brought back memories of that fierce, blood-stained rivalry. But not this time. In this life, I would not repeat the same mistakes. This young Madam seemed different, too. In the last life, at this moment, she had still been naive, nothing like the poised figure before me now. A sudden thought struck me. As if sensing my stare, the young Madam glanced at me. When our eyes met, the thought solidified. Perhaps she, too, had been reborn. The minister's Madam finally spoke, breaking the silence. I heard the Shun family's daughter is accomplished in the arts, music, painting, poetry, and chess. Graceful and refined like a chrysanthemum in bloom. My son is very fond of such qualities. Jiang Lanfeng, the hedonistic young master, nodded eagerly in agreement with everything his mother said. Madam smiled, her eyebrows arching gracefully. Yes, Ziyun truly is just like that, very much like her birth mother. A woman of great presence. Jiang's young Madam frowned faintly, but quickly smoothed her expression. The vice minister's Madam continued. I've met the girl, curvy figure, slim waist, a most auspicious physique. Once she marries into the Jiang family, how could we ever let her suffer? A woman of her status, a vice minister's wife, should never speak so coarsely in front of the bride's family. And yet, she did. It showed that she didn't care in the slightest. Madam, of course, didn't mind either. A concubine was nothing more than a man's plaything. Not even worth discussing. How laughable this all was. And how tragically real. For in this era, this was the inescapable fate of women. The two matriarchs chatted away happily and sealed the arrangement before long. When it was time to see the guests off, I walked alongside Zhang's young madam. She didn't look at me, but suddenly said, "You don't have to worry." I turned to her, surprised. "We fought each other for years," she continued. "If I couldn't recognize even this much change, then living through 2 lifetimes would have been a waste." I hadn't expected her to speak so frankly. "You've still chosen this path, Zhang young madam." She sighed. "I wasn't born with your luck. My maternal family needs the Zhang family's support. Marrying into it was their hope. The decision has long been made. I never had a choice." Resignation shone in her eyes. "You don't need to involve yourself any further. In the last life, Shen Ziyan toyed with both of us until we were bruised and broken. Now that she's marrying into the Zhang family, I will welcome her through the front gate with grandeur." I smiled faintly. She and I had battled for years. So long and so bitterly that neither of us won. In the end, Shun Ziyun was the one who benefited. That debt, Jiang young madam would not forget. Now reborn, she had finally understood. So had I. The so-called inner court struggles, the you live I die of concubine warfare, were nothing more than a man's tool to keep women in chains. In the last life, both of us had been sacrifices in that suffocating household. I nodded. All right, I agree. I wouldn't interfere. But that didn't mean I wouldn't lend a hand. I was, after all, a kind person. Shen Ziyun was still forced to enter the Jiang household through the narrow back gate. One of many concubines to Jiang Lanfeng, the vice minister's son. As for me, I was openly and honorably married to Qian, becoming his legal wife, his madam. The Shen family prepared a 10-mile dowry procession to escort me to my new home. The streets buzzed with admiration. Everyone said we were a perfect match. The top scholar and the daughter of the Shen family. What a beautiful tale. They say he loved her long before he passed the imperial exams. Such deep affection. A perfect match, talented man and noble lady. Qian rode a tall steed at the front, radiant and commanding. And I, the bride, blushed with a smile behind the wedding veil. The marriage was blessed from all sides. In contrast, Shun Ziyun's wedding day was utterly bleak. No grand sedan. No festive decorations. When she was delivered to the Jiang residence's side courtyard, not even the groom showed his face. For the entire affair had been deliberately kept quiet by Zhang's young madam. Jiang Lanfeng believed the ceremony was to happen on the 9th day of the new year. But in truth, Shun Ziyun had been brought in a day earlier, on the 8th. When she arrived, even her bridal room hadn't been prepared. She was a concubine, no need for red veils. Seeing the gray-toned courtyard, she frowned in dismay. Her face was blank, but her voice was heavy with bitterness. Why hasn't the bridal room been decorated? But no one answered her. Zhang's young madam was determined to teach her a lesson. Later, when Shun Ziyun confronted her, she found the young madam strolling with Jiang Lanfeng in the garden. Storming up, she cried out, "Why did you treat me this way? Do you hold some grudge against me, madam?" Zhang's young madam looked surprised. "What are you talking about? Besides, aren't you supposed to be married tomorrow?" She wasn't one to be bullied. She immediately retrieved the official concubine registry from the main hall, clearly marked with the date, the 9th. Shen Ziyun froze on the spot. Then, tears streamed down her face as she sobbed. "In my whole life, I've never suffered humiliation like this. You've gone too far." Her crying shattered Jiang Lanfeng's heart. "Don't cry, Yun. Seeing you cry breaks my heart." He embraced her gently. Yes, it's our fault. We didn't check the date carefully. We've wronged you." Zhang's young madam rolled her eyes so far back, they nearly reached the heavens. But it didn't matter. No matter how much love was shown now, the shame couldn't be undone. A concubine brought in on the wrong day. Such a farce spread through the capital like wildfire. At that moment, I was seated in the main hall of the Qi residence, sipping fragrant tea. The servants relayed the entire event in vivid detail. My husband laughed, shaking his head. How amusing. To think the vice minister's son was so easily swayed by a few tears. I let out a soft scoff. A woman who usually carried herself with strength and with grace, shedding sudden tears, it naturally became her most potent weapon. In our past life, this tactic of hers had never once failed. Jiang Lanfeng had always had a preference for her kind. As long as she cried, teardrops shimmering like pear blossoms in the rain, he would be utterly powerless to resist. Word had it that after Shinziyun entered the Jiang residence, she was deeply favored. For several nights in a row, Jiang Lanfeng stayed in her chambers. It was said he adored that chrysanthemum-like purity she projected. I sat, listening as the servants reported every detail from the Jiang household. And the young madam. She hasn't done anything. Not yet. Each day she remains in her own courtyard, sipping tea, reading scripture. I let out a cold laugh. How leisurely of her. But I knew her too well. My greatest rival in the previous life. The quieter she appeared, the more likely she was preparing a devastating move behind the curtain. Meanwhile, my dear younger sister was still drowning in love, unaware of the storm looming over her. No longer with me as her greatest shield, she would now have to endure every blade and arrow on her own. Over the next month, Shinziyun monopolized Jiang Lanfeng's favor. Each night, she conjured some reason to keep him in her chambers. And Jiang's young madam, not a flicker of reaction. In fact, she even urged Jiang Lanfeng to hurry along. Don't keep the beauty waiting, she said. That night, the couple quarreled so fiercely that the servants said chairs and tables were overturned. When I heard the news, realization dawned. 1 month. A sensitive period. Only a fool like Shinziyun wouldn't notice something was off. Sure enough, after a little over a month, Jiang's young madam invited the capital's most renowned gynecologist into the household. As for whom the doctor was meant to examine, there was no mystery. After more than a month of being favored, Shinziyun's belly still showed no sign of change. The reason the young madam had agreed to this concubine in the first place was so Jiang Lanfeng could extend the family line. And yet Shinziyun, not only did she fail to conceive, she clung to Jiang Lanfeng day and night, refusing to let him go. A classic case of sitting on the toilet, but refusing to do her business. Whether the physician found anything or not was unclear, but the rumors had already begun spreading outside. Shinziyun is barren. The gossip reached old Madame Zhang's ears, and she flew into a rage. She nearly had Shinziyun expelled from the household, calling her a deceitful wench spreading lies. Had it not been for father's face-saving reputation, Shinziyun might have been dragged out and buried alive. The entire Jiang residence was thrown into chaos. No one could calm the storm. When Jiang's young madam invited me for tea, it was during this very upheaval. We sat across from each other, sipping tea, listening to soft music and gentle song. Utterly serene. Your sister, she said with a smirk, is far less interesting than you. I let out a mocking laugh. I've played this game with you long enough. Isn't it time you switched flavors? She fanned herself lazily, her smile flirtatious. Indeed, you're always right. Still, something's missing from the fire. How about you join in the fun with me? I shot her a cool glance and set my teacup down. You think I'm so free and idle, just waiting to be drawn into some drama. Don't worry, your grand gift will arrive soon. Whether you make good use of it or not, depends on your performance. She chuckled, raised her cup, and toasted me. Don't worry. With just the lift of a finger, I could crush her. Truly entertaining. In our past life, she and I fought like mortal enemies. Now, we were somewhat aligned in purpose. That very night, the Jiang household gained a new bedmaid. That was the grand gift I had prepared for Shinziyun. This maid had no remarkable talents, but her seductive charms were unparalleled in the capital. I had carefully selected her. A woman crafted precisely to Jiang Lanfeng's tastes. She was even more beautiful than Shinziyun, and though she wore plain linen clothes, she exuded an ethereal elegance. Her entire aura had been meticulously trained by me. She was a chrysanthemum more radiant than my sister. That night, Shinziyun lost all favor. Jiang Lanfeng stayed with the bedmaid, utterly enthralled. To Shinziyun, this was nothing less than an invasion. But no matter how pitiful she acted, no matter how tearfully she begged, Jiang Lanfeng, enthralled in his new pleasure, didn't spare her a glance. Send her back, he said coldly. Don't ruin my good time. Just that one line shattered Shinziyun's last ounce of confidence. Zhang Lang, how could you be so heartless? You promised we'd gaze at the stars together tonight. Jiang Lanfeng, sweaty and distracted, heard the sobbing outside the door and grew irritable. Not a shred of tenderness remained in him. Get rid of her. His roar echoed through the halls. Shinziyun returned to her quarters, weeping alone the entire night. No one came to check on her. Zhang's young madam was very pleased with my gift. The next day, she sent a letter. The gift was delightful. In return, allow me to invite you to witness a fine performance. 7 days from now, you are cordially invited to a moonlit banquet in the lakeside pavilion of the vice minister's estate. The lakeside pavilion. That was the place where Jiang Lanfeng usually hosted feasts and indulged in pleasures. In our past life, it was there that my sister performed a breathtaking dance that stunned the entire court and earned Jiang Lanfeng's undivided affection. Meanwhile, I remained at home, falsely accused, poisoned, and miscarried. Back then, I had thought Zhang's young madam was behind it all. Only after our recent conversation did I realize I had been completely wrong. Most of the conflicts between her and me, 8 out of 10, stemmed from nothing at all. Looking back, it was laughable. The two of us, thinking ourselves clever, were simply being played. We became pawns, stirred up by someone else's schemes, tools to benefit others. This pavilion. In my past life, I hadn't even qualified to set foot inside. Now, I entered as an honored guest. Master Qi and Madam, welcome. Please come inside. When Jiang Lanfeng saw the two of us, his eyes lit up. He quickly ordered his attendants to receive us. I heard Madam Qi isn't fond of wine, so I had the kitchen prepare a selection of tea and pastries just for you. Please. I inwardly scoffed at his flattery. In my past life, he'd forced cup after cup of wine down my throat until my skin flushed red and I burned with heat. He hadn't worn that fawning expression back then. Qian was quite satisfied. Not bad. This man seems to know how to behave. These days, Qian was soaring in court, trusted deeply by the emperor himself. He had recently been specially appointed to the Hanlin Academy, and if nothing unexpected happened, he would likely become prime minister in the future. As for Jiang Lanfeng, a wastrel and playboy, he was more than happy to cozy up to someone so promising. And the best way to win over Qian was to please me. Everyone knew. Qian cherished his wife like his own life. After we were seated, the other guests rose and greeted him one by one. I glanced down, but didn't see Shinziyun anywhere. Only Zhang's young madam stood beside Jiang Lanfeng, smiling elegantly. Our eyes met across the room. I frowned slightly. This was going to be good. At my side, Qian was enthusiastically picking dishes for me. Try this. You've gotten thinner lately. Is the food at home not to your liking? I shook my head, cheeks tinged pink. If you could just restrain yourself a bit, husband, I wouldn't be this thin. Qian chuckled softly, leaning closer. Wife, youth is full of fire. What can I do? Embarrassed, I gave him a swift kick under the table. The performances and festivities carried on lively, but Shun Ziyun never appeared. At last, Zhang's young madam rose and addressed the crowd. Thank you, esteemed guests, for coming from far and wide. My husband and I have prepared fine wine and refreshments in the garden, where we may admire the moon together. The guests were delighted. Excellent. Marvelous. Please, lead the way. Jiang Lanfeng basked in the praise as he led everyone toward the rear courtyard. But when we arrived, someone exclaimed, why is it so bright over there? Zhang's young madam remained calm, smiling gently. No need to rush. That pavilion over there is where we'll gather to enjoy the moonlight. If anyone is tired, feel free to rest inside. Or, if you prefer, the garden is open. Enjoy the scenery however you wish. Wonderful. Wonderful. Senior Censor Lu stroked his beard and laughed heartily. An avid poet and lover of elegant gatherings, he was inspired by the moonlight and garden view. He eagerly stepped into the pavilion first. Moments later, his expression darkened. What is this disgrace? An insult to refinement. Jiang Lanfeng and his wife rushed inside after him, only to see two entangled bodies on the floor. The censor stormed out, furious. Unacceptable. Qian immediately shielded my eyes. Filth. Don't look. But I couldn't help sneaking a peek through my fingers. Jiang Lanfeng instantly recognized the woman beneath the man. His face twisted in fury. He seized a teacup and hurled it straight at her forehead. It was Shun Ziyun. You wench. You dare cheat on me. The two naked figures scrambled apart, shrieking. I was wrong. Forgive me, husband. I was tricked. The madam set me up. I'm innocent. Zhang's young madam scoffed. Why would I trick you and ruin such a beautiful evening? Besides, how could I force you to be like that with someone? She kicked the man beside Shin Ziyun. Speak. Who are you? The man trembled and collapsed to his knees, unable to speak. Jiang Lanfeng was livid. His face turned a frightening shade of black as he glared at Shen Ziyun. I haven't even accused you yet, and you're already trying to pass the blame. You were the one whoring around. Don't you dare act innocent. He turned toward the man and narrowed his eyes. I remember you. You're the rouge merchant from the East Market. So bold, climbing into my concubine's bed. The merchant fell flat, groveling. Please, have mercy. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. After such an uproar, no one had the mood to admire the moon or flowers anymore. One by one, the guests took their leave. Jiang Lanfeng stayed behind to handle the scandal. Zhang's young madam saw the guests off. As she passed me, she gave me a knowing, satisfied glance. I discreetly raised my thumb in Zhang's young madam's direction, a silent gesture of praise. Qian, clearly uncomfortable, quickly leaned in, anxious to take me away from such a disgraceful scene. Your sister and you, truly are worlds apart. I let out a light laugh, lips curled faintly. Of course we're different. I was raised by mother's side, carefully taught and disciplined. She grew up with our birth mother. After she passed, my sister raised herself. It hasn't been easy for her either. Qian looked puzzled. Then why didn't she come with you to madam? I sighed. Because my sister is someone who values her pride above all else. The very next day, Zhang's young madam practically bounced into my manor, giddy with delight. Ha! You won't believe it. That wretched woman is locked up now. Jiang Lanfeng was so furious, he couldn't eat all day. Ha! I sipped my tea, calm as still water. You seem to be enjoying yourself. She grinned ear to ear. Of course I am. The worse his mood gets, the better mine becomes. Now every time he looks at a bed, all he can think of is Shen Ziyun tangled with another man. It's perfect, he's developed a psychological wound. Truly a cause for celebration. We couldn't help it. We both burst into laughter. But as the laughter faded, I asked with a more serious tone. Didn't Shen Ziyun love your husband deeply? Why would she do such a thing? Zhang's young madam smiled slyly. She couldn't get pregnant and grew desperate. On top of that, thanks to your generous gift, she feared losing favor. Desperation leads to recklessness. She paused, her expression gleaming with cunning. She wanted a child to secure her place. But once it was known she had trouble conceiving, the old madam forbade Jiang Lanfeng from visiting her. What could she do but take matters into her own hands? I merely gave her a little nudge, the rest was all her choice. Though, I didn't expect she'd actually roll around with a man in the pavilion. Bold, wasn't she? I smiled faintly. She hadn't told me everything. Of that, I was certain. And sure enough, the spy I had placed in the Jiang residence soon reported back. The first night Shen Ziyun spent with the rouge merchant. She had been drugged, by none other than Zhang's young madam. But every night afterward, those were of her own choosing. She wanted to borrow a seed. 3 days later, Shen Ziyun came crawling to my doorstep in utter disgrace. I had no idea how she even escaped. Sister, please save me. I stood in my grand robes, radiant under the morning light. She knelt before me, hair disheveled, her forehead striking the floor over and over. I said nothing. I simply stood, smiling. Sister, please. You can't let this happen. That man, he's gone. He disappeared without a word. He didn't even take me with him. Jiang Lanfeng is furious. He says he'll beat me to death. Sister, you won't just stand by and watch, will you? Still, I said nothing. I let her perform. Sister, say something. Save me. Please, if you don't help me, I'll die. At last, I stepped forward. I looked down at her from above, her face swollen with tears, voice hoarse. A woman with no shame like you. Perhaps death is the best escape. Shen Ziyun froze. What did you say? All it takes is one word from you, and I'd be saved. Why won't you say it? We're sisters, real sisters. Sisters. I laughed. When you ruined me in our past life. When you destroyed the child in my womb. Did you remember that we were sisters? My golden embroidered shoes clicked softly as I walked into the room. I'm only returning your own words, Shen Ziyun. Jiang Lanfeng is probably still looking for you. I waved my hand casually. Someone escort her back to the Jiang residence. Make sure to deliver her directly into Jiang Lanfeng's hands. I smiled as I returned to my room, not sparing her a backward glance. No matter how she screamed, sobbed, or cursed from behind me, I remained indifferent. I curved my lips, wholly satisfied with Jiang Lanfeng's decision. This was just right, and none of them would ever know. Even the fake rouge merchant had been mine from the start. It was I who planted him. It was I who orchestrated the moonlit tryst at the very hour of the banquet. Zhang's young madam had only planned for Jiang Lanfeng to catch them in private. But I ensured he was humiliated before everyone. That's when the thought of killing her took root in his heart. And as for the so-called merchant, he wasn't the real owner of the rouge shop. The true owner was me. Just then, Wenyu, my handmaid, walked in holding a thick ledger. Madam, our business is booming. Ever since word spread that the rouge shop's scandal involved a fake merchant, curious customers from all over the city have been flocking in. Our sales have never been better. I glanced at the rising silver tally in the books. Leisurely, I fanned myself and replied, Nicely done. Wenyu grinned. People are trying to guess the real shop owner's identity. Some say he's a handsome, poetic young master. Others say he's a hideous man too ashamed to show his face. No one suspects our real boss is such a stunning beauty. I smiled. Everyone assumes a woman couldn't possibly run a shop. But I am no ordinary woman. The end.